Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So now we have our featured speaker today. Although all of you, I'm very grateful that you have all come and shared your wisdom and insights. Nimai Caitanya Prabhu, thank you so much for joining us. You studied Ayurveda under one of the students of Dr. Vasant Lad, who's probably the leading Ayurvedic proponent in America. At least I have several of his books for the last 20 years or so. How long ago did you, first of all, could you just say something about yourself? When did you first meet the devotees? What year was that? And where did you serve?
I met the devotees actually in 1982 at Gettysburg College. I was a student there, and we went to Gita Nagari. I was taking a religion class, and we went to Gita Nagari, and I met devotees, and it was a wonderful experience. I remember thinking to myself, I will never do this, is what the thought I had. And then one thing led to another.
That's a sign that you were thinking, wow, this is attractive, but I'm going to have to give up a lot of things, right?
Right. And I was into meditation, and, I was a Yogananda person at the time, but I'll never do it. So anyway, and then I went to Europe, and I traveled around Europe, and I met Bhagavan.
Okay.
And eventually in 1986, I took initiation with him. I became a servant of his.
Oh.
And traveled with him, and in 86 I took initiation in Mayapur, and then of course shortly after that he left. And then I associated for quite a while with Srila Bhakti Tirtha Swami, and had some, he was very, very helpful to me during that time. And we moved out to California, came back here, and then in 2001 I met Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj. And I took Diksha and association from him.
You must have been a very qualified man, because knowing Bhagavan Prabhu, he had very high standards. He wouldn't just have anyone as his personal servant.
But it was an interesting time, because I was there during that whole process when, we'll call it the transition,
right.
When he left. So that was very, very, it was a good learning experience for me, for sure.
And what year did you meet Bhaktivedanta Narayan Maharaj?
2001.
2001. Okay. And so when did you start practicing or studying Ayurveda?
Well, that was in about 1982. I started dabbling with it. And then in 80, what was it? Actually, I was dabbling with it through the 80s. And then in the early 90s, I started studying it more intensively. And I also went to a 5-element acupuncture school, which is sort of the closest thing to Ayurvedic acupuncture.
Okay.
And I studied that, so I practice acupuncture, 5-element acupuncture, along with Ayurveda in my practice.
Thank you. From your holistic perspective in what you learned, when you hear about a virus, or you hear about this kind of symptoms that people have been experiencing for the last 2 years since this lab-made Corona SARS-2 fabrication was unleashed on society, normally, how would you be thinking? Okay, this person has got respiratory symptoms. I hear people have problems breathing. If they have COVID, they become very weak. What does your training tell you how you need to deal with it?
Well, the training tells us very much, in terms of the spirit of Peter McCullough, and his whole thing is, treat the damn thing early, right? So, but that's been the case with Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, naturopathy for a very long time. Disease comes in stages. In Ayurveda, there's 6 stages. In Chinese medicine, there's either 4 or 6 stages.
Right.
So you treat it early. And so that idea, like what Mahaprabhu was saying, was, letting people get really sick. It's kind of like if I take my car to the mechanic and say, the engine light's on, and they say, go home. And, when the engine starts smoking, then bring the car back. I mean, that's what we've been doing. It's just completely idiotic. And, there are certainly things that we can do to treat early. So there's obviously, we know about the pharmaceutical reused drugs. And we also, there's so many wonderful Chinese herbal formulas. In fact, there's a Chinese herbal formula that was developed specifically for COVID. And it's actually very effective. And I give it to a lot of my patients. And if they take it early, then, they usually do very, very well. So that plus, the standard quercetin, zinc, and D, and all that kind of stuff.
Is that called the silver something, or the
flower? Yeah.
Silver flower. Okay. Yeah. So from the pharmaceutical point of view, if they see a virus, take the vaccination. That's what they say, right? But as a holistic practitioner, you're looking at a broader perspective, correct?
Much broader, much broader. And you have to treat the person early on, and you minimize the secondary. I mean, most people who get really sick, it's from that second, that next stage. They call it the cytokine storm, which is, the immune system goes crazy for lots of different reasons. And, and then the body can't handle it. So if you treat it early, clear it early, support the lungs, support the immune system, support the body's ability to clear all the debris that is sloughing off from releasing all these toxins out of the body, then you don't have to get those horrible symptoms that people do. And just like, if you've ever had a bad flu, it's not fun. I remember the last time I had a flu years ago. I remember thinking, now I understand why people get the flu vaccine. Not that I would get it, not that I would want it, but I was feeling crappy enough to go, I could see, like, people don't want this. They think it's going to help them. It's really not going to help them, but I can see why in a vulnerable state they would want to do that. And people get really scared of this too, of COVID. So, for some people, it's really nasty. Being a patient today who just got out of the hospital. So, for some people, it can be really tough, but you treat it early, and for the most part, people do really well.
Thank you.
They do well.
I've heard that, okay, because you mentioned cytokine storm. If you could define that and also explain, does the cytokine storm come as a result of getting COVID, or does it come as a result of getting the injection, which then...
the cytokine storm...
What is it, first of all?
Okay, the cytokine storm is, there's a cytokine. Cytokines are inflammatory hormones, basically, that help to stimulate the immune system. So, if there's an invader of some kind, your body wants to stimulate your system in order to, handle what's going on. So basically what happens in the cytokine storm is that, if someone gets sick, whether it's a flu or COVID or whatever, then the immune system stimulates, it starts working, it starts, attacking, putting out those white blood cells, the T cells, and, the memory cells start in a few days too. And they start dealing with the viral particles or whatever the heck it is.
Okay.
So that's a good thing. But what happens is that if that part of the immune system is on go mode, and the part of the immune system, and this is due to a weakened immune system, is due to other morbidities, it's due to bad diet, to diabetes, to heart disease, to blood sugar issues, all kinds of things can impact, to stress levels, other hormones, can impact the immune system so that go mode of the immune system doesn't turn off and the slow mode doesn't turn on. So now, even though the virus is kind of, in one sense, left the body, you're not dealing with that initial stage. Now you're dealing with this other stage of this body being in constant immune reaction and inflammatory reaction. And now you're dealing with inflammation in the lung tissue. Now you're starting to deal with micro clotting and scar, even eventually scarring in the lungs. So that's where it gets really dangerous. That's where people start to develop really, really serious coughs and difficult breathing and things like that. That's the second stage. So a lot of people, and I tell this to people, if you get sick, don't get back into your daily activities and push yourself the day you feel better. Because I've seen too many people, they feel better for a day. Like I had a friend the other day who's better. he went out shoveling snow because we had a big snowstorm. The next day he felt like crap. He's doing fine again, but it was a tenuous moment because he pushed himself too much. I feel fine. I told him just chill out. And so this happens. So if somebody gets that second stage, that's a cytokine storm. And that has nothing to do, in one sense, with the virus. It's a reaction of the virus. It's a secondary stage. So people can, in 5 days, start to feel better, and then better, better, better. Or else 5 days, they're sick, and then day 6, they feel better, and day 7, they start feeling bad again. And that's when you really have to start watching what you're doing. And this is where, also things like quercetin comes in really helpful, zinc, the mectin, the different pharmaceuticals like that can be really helpful too. And the Chinese herbs are super duper helpful. I mean, there's Chinese herbs that are specifically for heat toxins in the lungs, and they work really well. They work really well.
Is that what the COVID would be defined as a heat toxin in the lung?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the main symptoms of it, yes.
Okay. I'm curious to know, as a holistic practitioner, from what you've been observing over the last couple of years, are COVID patients easier to cure and support than those who took the jab? Are the ones who took the jab, I'm assuming you've had both kinds of patients.
Yes. So the ones, this is a generalization, but the ones who get COVID, ones that get a relatively bad case of COVID after the jab tend to be more problematic.
Wait a minute. You said they get COVID after the jab, but the jab is supposed to protect them from COVID.
Right. Well, we know that doesn't really happen very much. So, look, there may have been a phase where the jab was actually minimizing severity, and I hated to admit that, but there was a phase when that was happening. Hated to admit it because I see a much greater picture, like all of you guys have been talking about, what's really happening, what the intention is. But there was something to be said. They're idiots, but they're not complete idiots in the sense that they're not going to make something that does absolutely nothing ever. So there is a little phase.
Would you say then that it gives the illusion of giving some level of immunity for a month or two? Yes?
Yeah, I would say it in some cases, yes. But now with this next virus that's happening now, the Omicron, it barely seems to be doing anything. It's a very different thing. So, I have patients who have, I put it this way, they have not had COVID and they got the vaccine, and some of them feel like crap. They have a lot of different symptoms. I've had some COVID patients that haven't had the vaccine that got COVID, in some cases severely. One person, a number of people do very well, and a couple people have really struggled. I think sometimes we forget that it was made in a lab also. So it's sometimes the attention has gone so much to the shot that we forget that the original thing was pretty nasty because it was also man-made. I have a client who lost his ability to move his left foot just from getting COVID, and he was not vaccinated. Now he's fine. He plays hockey, he's fine. We did a lot of acupuncture. He did great. So he's fine now. But, someone else who might have been elderly or, unfit or whatever, they might have suffered for a long time. But I will say every week I see people coming into my practice who are suffering due to the shot. That's an absolute.
And what is expand a little bit on that? I was wondering, how do people, because I see a lot of people don't correlate these things. So a lot of people are getting symptoms, but they don't relate it to the jab. They wouldn't even think about that.
So it's a great question. It's a really important question. Because the way I do it, because I'm living in Massachusetts, it's a very, very highly jabbed area. And most of my clients have been. There's a number that haven't, but I would say 75%, 80% have. So I have to be a little careful about how I talk. They all know where I'm at. They know what my thoughts are, but So when I talk to them, they come in with symptoms. The last question I ask is, so when was your jab? Just pretend like it's normal. And then they tell me. And then my next question is, so how soon after your symptoms began did you get the jab? And in many cases, oh, it was about a week or two. Oh, interesting. Has any of you, they've been to other doctors, has anybody else mentioned there could be a connection? No, no one's mentioned that. I mean, I had a guy who came in the other day, he went to 12 doctors. Not one mentioned it.
Wow.
And now we know for sure, you have to like pull it out of people, and then they make a connection. And then sometimes they actually say, actually more commonly than I thought, they said, I had the thought, but nobody mentioned it. So I really didn't, I didn't give it any credence, the thought. But on some level, people know, a lot of people know that maybe it was that, but they're scared to admit it. And because they're not seeing it on media, they're not seeing these issues, it's not really prominent in their consciousness. But, I mean, it's amazing to me how people don't make the connections. And I've talked to other, like on the West Coast in Oregon, all the naturopaths there are all vaccinated, and most of them are pro-vax. And it blows my mind. And like I was talking to a devotee who's in the middle, and he said, well, none of my friends, and he's a naturopath, none of my friends, say that anybody's been harmed. I don't know why you're seeing all these people. And I believe they're not asking the right questions. They're not asking that final question of when, the timing of things, because I'm seeing it so often where the symptom is correlated timing, a week to 2 weeks, and they're not being told. They're just looking at the symptoms. They're not making that connection. And it's an important connection, because unless if that's what it is, you got to start cleaning up those blood vessels, because there's inflammation, there's all kinds of stuff going on that you got to really work on. You don't just, treat it like you might normally treat it. You got to treat it differently.
Because some people, actually the mainstream media is now trying to blame the symptoms of, say, vaccine injury to COVID. So they're saying COVID gives you myocarditis and COVID will give you this, and these are all the symptoms. So you see propaganda like this. But in your practice, what would you say, if you could elaborate a little bit on what's the difference between symptoms of a patient who got COVID and who got this shot? So what are some clear differences that you've observed?
So, and I would say there's two categories. One is they're not that different, in terms of the lingering effects for some people. But one thing that's really interesting, they're blaming it on COVID. But it's so easy to forget. They're blaming it. They're saying, look, if you get the vaccine, you might have a chance of myocarditis. If you get COVID, you might have the chance of myocarditis, which that's true. Okay, there's truth. There's some truth in that. However, what they're not saying, or what they're not doing, is saying, but if you get it, you should take these medicines and these herbs in order to prevent you from getting it. They're acting as if, we have to remember and not lose that awareness of they are intentionally preventing the use of medicines and herbs to prevent serious conditions from occurring, as if that's normal. That's not normal. That is not medicine. It never has been. And Western medicine has a lot of problems. There's no question. And they do not do very well at treating, at the root. That's not their forte. But we should be treating early with this thing. And to say that, well, we're looking at statistically, myocarditis happens in the vaccinated, myocarditis happens in the unvaccinated, myocarditis happens in COVID and myocarditis happens in the vaccinated. So, there's no difference. So just get vaccinated. That's kind of where they're going with that argument. But they wouldn't get myocarditis if they were given the right medicine, early treatment. They wouldn't get these secondary effects. They wouldn't get long haul COVID if they were treated early and properly. They wouldn't. So, or it would be very rare. So, having said that, I'd say the general thing for people on both sides would be fatigue, mental fog, things like that. That is common on both sides, which is bad. Whether it's the spike or whether it's the, or whether it's the graphene or whatever the heck it is that's causing the problem, it's there in both. And many, scientists are thinking that it's the spike protein, inflammatory activity of the spike protein, that's causing the inflammation in the blood vessels, causing scarring, causing blood clotting, and things like that. So what's going to happen? That's happened in COVID. It was a spike. It's a similar phenomena. So it can also happen in the vaccine. So that's why it's not always that different in terms of long haul COVID and long haul vax injury.
But if you take the COVID itself aside, are you saying that there's the similar side effects to both catching the COVID and getting the vaccine and getting a vaccine injury? Because we're seeing things like people losing their nervous system or not being able to move or shaking erratically and getting Bell's palsy. So are you telling me that contracting COVID from somebody can give you these effects also, or is that something we see more as a vaccine injury?
There can be some of that also. Like I told you, my client who lost ability to move his foot, that was a neurological situation. But what's different is I have not seen that, that often. Number one. Number two is that with a shot, with regular COVID, it's more of a normal immune response. Your body has a chance to fight it all the way. When you shoot it right into the blood, right into the body, you're bypassing the immune system. You're bypassing many layers of the immune system. It's in your body. So in that sense, it's more likely you're going to get a neurological response, in my opinion, from the shot than you would from COVID itself, because you've had the chance, to, especially if you treat it early, you're not going to get those responses. With the shot, you have no defense. It's like you're going through the nose, all the immune factors in the nose, all the immune factors in the esophagus, all the immune factors in the lungs, all the immune factors in the stomach. Your body's working that whole time. Where the shot is just in there, boom. You can't fight it. You can only fight it on the blood level when it's already in your system.
This reminds me of, for example, say you take St. John's wort, and what the pharmaceutical industry calls hypericum is the active principle. If you use the whole of St. John's wort, then it's buffered, right? Because you've got the leaves, you've got the roots, but if you just were to take, I mean, maybe St. John's wort is not the best example, but the point I'm trying to share is, or that I'm inquiring from you, or I'm wondering if there's, if you can make a comparison there, that in the same way you've said by taking the injection, it cuts through and it's very harsh. Whereas if you're taking an herb, it's buffered.
Right.
Yes.
So I understand your point. Yeah, that's it's a decent analogy. That's always been one of the big arguments with vaccines anyway, is it bypasses a great part of your immune system. Of course, this isn't a vaccine. This is something else. But the point is it's bypassing. You're shooting it into the body. So you don't have the normal immune responses that your body. A lot of people, we rock around, we get all kinds of stuff in our nose, all kinds of viral particles and bacteria and parasites and, who knows what, toxins in our nose, and our immune system here is acting. The immune system in the throat is acting, and people never get sick. And if we got sick with every virus that came along, we'd all be, dead in about a day. But that doesn't happen.
Could you please say something about the viral versus the terrain theory? I've heard that most of us, we have all varieties of different bugs in us, but if the immune system is strong, then we're not going to be affected. But if people are like drinking alcohol, eating meat, keeping all kinds of crazy hours, eating junk processed GMO food that Bill Gates helps to produce, then we're more susceptible.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's totally true. The terrain versus the external pathogen idea. And, even in our world, there's the debates between, Mercola just came out with something sort of validating the virus. And then, other people, like Dr. Kaufman and Dr. Robert Young sort of, talk about there's no such thing as a virus. And,
Right.
I think whatever it is a toxin. So, if you want to call it a virus, if you want to call it a manufactured genetic code that makes your body do something, whatever it is,
A pathogen. The
it's a
pathogen.
pathogen. There's a external pathogen happening. And I do think, we can get into all the stuff. I do think there's a 5G connection. It all works together. And then when you take a sick body that's, full of toxins, full of, poor diet, other health conditions, it's just it creates a perfect environment for the perfect storm. So it's very true. But I think, to say it's just the terrain is like, well, every terrain can only take so much arsenic before it really dies, There's only so many toxins. So yes, if it's my terrain, but if there's an external pathogen that keeps coming into my environment, then, eventually I get sick. So, it's both. That's why we do have to take care of ourselves. And that's why it is a good idea. Like, after, being out and about, do the neti pot, clear out, even the neti pot, they were talking about that in the beginning, steam your nose, snort up saline, stuff like that. And then someone came out, who wrote it? I don't know. Oh, one person got sick and, the water got into their brain and the neti pot and they died, something like that. So everybody said, don't take the neti pot. It'll push it further into your body. I mean, that's so ridiculous. But that was like common knowledge on Facebook. Don't do the neti pot with this thing. It'll push it further into your body.
I was
it's insane, some of the stuff that was coming out.
One Ayurvedic.
Your body, clear your nose out, clear out your throat, gargle.
I was watching one Ayurvedic because I remember as a little boy, whenever I get a cough or a cold, my mom would put Vicks Vapor Rub in the vaporizer or in a pot, and put a towel over my head, and have me in the vapors. And I saw one Ayurvedic practitioner a couple years back saying the best thing is to put eucalyptus and breathe the eucalyptus. And he was saying he was having fantastic results with that.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing at the sign of anything, like even a little sign of something, that's a great idea. I mean, when I have a little spray bottle in my office, like when I'm working closely with a patient, if like intuitively or whatever, I just do a couple sprays, clear out the gunk in the sinuses. So it just makes sense. Take care of yourself externally and internally. Eat clean, drink a lot of water, break a sweat sometimes. Devotees, eating vegetarian's not a problem, but sometimes as devotees, if there's a lot of lung stuff happening, that's what you got to pull back on the dairy. Devotees eat a lot of dairy. Devotees don't, but it's really important to watch. And the sugar, at least I know when I used to live in the temple, it was all about the dairy and the sugar. Right. So be careful of that stuff. So.
Yeah, we have Tulsi Manjari who's had her hand up for quite a few minutes. I'd like to ask, do you have a question you want to ask?
Thank you.
Please.
Is that okay? Okay.
Yes.
I was wondering, because we're talking a lot about Chinese medicinal herbs. What would be to you, I don't know if you know any of the local herbs here, what would be to you the, comparable herbs from here? For example, I use many things like calendula, thyme, like echinacea, or any of these. I guess it would be good also to
He's in southern Quebec.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, herbs that are really you can probably get also andrographis, I would think, which is an Ayurvedic and Chinese herb. Gaduchi, andrographis. Olive leaf extract is very good. Oregano extract, really good. And I honestly really, really like, quercetin. I think everybody should have high quality quercetin. It's a really good, really can help prevent that cytokine storm in the lungs. So if anybody has a tendency toward asthma, bronchial stuff, everybody should have a good source of quercetin, and of course zinc, like that.
And I have thank you. And I have another
And
question.
good echinacea, high quality echinacea.
Okay. Yeah, my daughter got vaccinated by her father. It's complicated, and I don't get to see her so often. Do you know, like one thing that would be really good for her to get, like if I see her 2 days in a row or something like that?
I would do something like, quercetin, zinc, maybe also andrographis, resveratrol, something really good for the blood vessels, grapeseed extract, keeping the inflammation in the blood vessels down, keeping the blood flow really good, decreasing inflammation. That's what I would focus on.
All right.
I'm seeing that people that have been whacked out by the vaccine do really well with bioflavonoids and anti-inflammatories, turmeric, quercetin, like that. Just keeping the blood flowing really well and keeping those blood vessels happy, so that they don't get symptoms. So guys, I have to go in literally 2 minutes because I get a client.
Trader Prabhu, do you have a question you want to ask also?
You're on mute, Prabhu.
You're unmuted though.
Hi, thank you. Haribo Prabhus. My
Haribo.
question is, has anyone heard colloidal silver?
Yeah.
Yes, colloidal silver. That's sort of, I didn't even mention that, but that's sort of a backdrop. My family, we have bottles lying around, and sometimes I'll spray my eyes and my ears and my nose, just sort of spray it up there, spray the throat. Good to have around. It can be really, it's a good one.
Excellent. Excellent. And you said oregano oil as well, so we use
Oregano's
lots
really
of that.
Yep.
Awesome.
I love peppermint oil too. So if the lungs start getting a little bit tight, if you take, you can steam it, but even an easy way to do it is make a hot cup of water, and put a couple drops of peppermint oil on top of that. Just kind of breathe it in. It's really good for the lungs. It dilates the bronchioles.
How about grapefruit seed oil?
What's
Grapefruit seed oil.
Grapefruit, yeah, it's funny. I think that one's been a little controversial. I don't use it myself, but if some people love it and they swear by it. So can't say by experience on that one, but I've heard good things, and I've also heard it's not as effective as some people think it is. So
right.
Thank you so much. For the few remaining minutes you have, what would you want to say as your conclusion? The most urgent message you have for devotees
honestly,
at large?
Devotees at large,
who may watch this.
Devotees, we are meant to know based on scripture, based on what our guru has told us, sadhu, shastra, and guru. And it's understood when we serve guru, we know everything we need to know, right? And I think Mahaprabhu really made the point earlier, when we don't follow guru, then what else happens? Maya enters. It has to enter. So yes, Maya has entered institutionally in a very big way, but everyone here, there's something we knew by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and our spiritual masters, that something was really off. And then that we need to trust that, because Krishna is giving us that information. Krishna, just because it's not, the reports have not come in on everything 2 years ago, but a lot of us here were like, I don't trust what's happening. I mean, I remember telling friends and family, they're going to make the vaccine mandatory. Oh no, they won't. Everybody thought I was crazy for saying some of the things that I've said. And I'm not a mystic visionary. To me, it was common sense.
You were listening to Super Soul, intuition.
Yes.
Trust
Yes.
Krishna.
Hey, listen, hold on 1 second. I'll be right back. A patient just got here, and I got to open up the door.
Yeah.
Right back.
Yeah. I was just inspired to think of, what's on the American dollar. In God we trust. So Krishna.
Sam satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yedamam upayantite. To those who constantly worship me with love, I give them the intelligence how to come back to me.
Yes, so we should trust in Krishna when he's speaking to us within the heart. We need to have our ears and eyes open to be receptive and not allow Bill Gates or Anthony Fauci to say, no, I know better than Super Soul. I'm your new Super Soul. I don't think so.
Yeah, it's like, trust trust it's common sense too. When it's, when you don't treat a disease and you just wait and wait and wait and wait for some guy up in the clouds or, some autocratic authoritarian so-called doctor to tell you, oh, you can't use that. We haven't tested it yet. I'm so tired that we haven't tested it. I've been hearing that for, might as well stop doing acupuncture, Ayurveda, anything, even though it's been done for thousands of years. We haven't done the FDA studies. I've had arguments with doctors about using herbs for psychological issues, and I remember having a fight with some guy who was screaming at me, how dare you use something like that because it's never been tested. And I'm like, okay, so you're telling me I should wait for 30, 40, 50 years before I can help somebody when I can help them in a week. And you're telling me, no, I have to wait for 50, 60, 100, 1,000 years before I can help somebody because I want to wait for your tests.
We say that the Vedic scientists did those tests 5,000 years ago. You're just catching up now.
Exactly.
You don't, the audacity to say that, the arrogance that until it goes through our laboratories, only then will we give our seal of approval. Who cares for your laboratories? My faith is with Bhargava and the Ashwini Kumaras and Bharadwaj and Lord Indra who received the Ayurveda. Go ahead, Prabhu.
Yeah, yes, I have to go, but using common sense, Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, it's based on natural laws, and those laws don't go away no matter what it is. Even if it's a man-made thing, the laws don't go away. And the first law is treat it early and cause as little harm as possible. Do the most effective thing with the least toxic in the least toxic way, as soon as possible.
That big
and leadership that's not speaking that is either they're doing it with knowledge for motivated reasons, or they're doing it completely out of fear, or they're an illusion completely. And it's a big problem, as we know. You guys have all spoken that very deeply and profoundly, so I'm not going to speak again to that. I would like to say more about that whole agenda at some point, but I do have to go.
So those who propound themselves as leaders, in many cases, are misleaders.
They're not real leaders anymore. They're not the leaders that I want to follow, unfortunately, at this time.
You please go to carry your patients. I'd like to carry this on with anyone else may have a few comments. Thank you so much, Nimai.
Through everybody.
We'll do it again, maybe. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So that was wonderful. Abanabhata, do you have any thoughts from what you heard spoken? Would you like to comment?
Prabhu, just to reiterate what Nimai Caitanya was saying, because I've had symptoms of chronic disease for a number of years, starting about 3 years ago with chronic fatigue, brain fog, and I started doing extensive research on the internet, and I found all these health summits where they'll find like 30 experts on Lyme disease and do videos for about a week interviewing all these people. And they interviewed one of the main filmmakers, one of these young, very avant-garde filmmakers who were filming this whole thing. They said, well, you've done a lot of these documentaries and you've filmed a lot of people. I want to ask you, in your opinion, if you can narrow things down and say, what is the number one problem with everything that's going on? He said, I'll tell you what the number one problem is. The biggest problem is that people have lost the desire to think for themselves.
Wow.
And that reverberates everywhere within modern society, within ISKCON. And it was, that was, we had a medical doctor just come on, Nimai Caitanya, and talk about that. This is
Your voice is going out.
consciousness, is that we have to come to the level of spontaneous devotional service. And that means, recognizing that Krishna is always talking to us. Krishna is trying to reach us, and our false ego is so consumed by, our alone here. I'm talking for myself. I started doing it a few ago as I started intensifying my sadhana. At the same time, it did all these different herbal treatments and stuff. And after years of spending probably $20,000 on all these herbal things and at the 6, 8, sometimes 10, 12 hours of job a day, the only thing that I did for my health that I could see where I had specific measurable results was my chanting of Hare Krishna.
Wow. Eneche o shaudi maya nashi baro lagi harinama mahamantra lao tumi maigi. I've come to give you the medicine to wipe out your disease of illusion. Take this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare
Hare Hare.
Rama, 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 Rama.
There's nothing like the name in all the three worlds. So thank you for reminding us, Dr. Banabhata Prabhu, of our most important health protocol. And thank you for the beautiful, can you give us a quick little tour of Prabhupada's palace? Because that's where you are right now. Can you show us? I haven't been there in a few years.
Yeah, so here's Prabhupada.
Let's
on
see.
the altar.
Wait, we can't
You
see.
see him?
Show us. No. How
Oh,
come
wait.
we?
Can
Okay,
you
good.
see now?
Yeah, beautiful. I helped to finish that Prabhupada's palace. I was part of the marathon crew. So there's Prabhupada. Can you take us to him, please, with your camera?
I'm wondering how to do this. Can you see him now?
Yes. Bye, Prabhupada.
Gaura, you have to be quiet so that his camera will show it. When you speak, it clicks back to you.
I will. Thank you.
So there's Srila Prabhupada on the altar. These are some of Srila Prabhupada's personal items here. A couple pairs of his shoes, a couple of his canes. Can you see that?
We see the bongo. Is that the original bongo at 26 2nd Avenue?
Yeah, that's the original bongo. There's a picture of Prabhupada sitting in Tompkins Square Park playing the drum.
Wow.
And in the background, I don't know if you can see, there's several devotees. You may even recognize who they are dancing and chanting in the background.
Chutananda maybe Rupanuga, I think.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
And then let me turn the other light on here. And you can see the magnificent work the devotees did on the ceiling. There are about 5 well-known ISKCON artists who did all the artwork on the ceiling.
Murli Dar was one of them. I think Vishnu Das Prabhu was another.
Gaura, every time you speak, the camera goes to you and we don't see what he's showing.
I'm going to mute you, Gaura. I'm going to mute you.
I got it.
So now,
Go ahead,
if you like,
Banabhata.
I'll take you really quick to Prabhupada's study. We're going down the hallway. Here's Prabhupada's lotus feet. And here is Prabhupada's study. Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Hi, Prabhupada.
Prabhupada, would you like to say a few words to the devotees? Prabhupada? Sorry. So, so there's Prabhupada, here's Radha and Krishna. Okay, that's all from me. Back to you, Gaur. Gaur, you're muted.
Mahaprabhu, Prabhu, you were in charge of the palace for some time, years, were you not?
Yes, originally when it opened up, we took it from about there was like 300 visitors before we took it up, and in the course of the next several years, we went up to 3 million visitors, and it became the third largest attraction in West Virginia, with over 900 bus tours and literally hundreds of thousands of Back to Godhead specifically designed for Prabhupada's palace, and all of the devotees like Bhanubhata, who's doing now, all of the devotees who took tours of sometimes between 5 and 30 people, all heard for like 20 minutes of, different, and they were able to ask questions and take a book and take prasadam and see Srila Prabhupada in the room. So it was like so effective that, Prabhupada was sending literally millions of people to come and visit it. And unfortunately, things I had left there under some controversy that we left because of Kirtananda at that time. But, I was thankful that when I got here in this area, because I'm also in the New Vrindavan area, that Bhanubhata was, had been assigned to take care of the palace. I thought, now that a Prabhupada disciple is here again, it can start growing again. But
Right.
I'll leave it at that. Bhanubhata can finish the rest if he wants.
Yeah, well, there's a new manager now. I think he just arrived yesterday, because Krishna's trying to put me in a position where I can focus on the second half of Prabhupada's mission, because New Vrindavan is the place where Prabhupada spent so much time here, gave so many instructions to the devotee, and unfortunately, those instructions at this point seem to be falling upon deaf ears. So there's a core group of devotees now who are trying to assist Yudhisthira, who's been working tirelessly to try to fulfill those specific instructions, simple living, high thinking. He's been working single-handedly, and I'm moving over there. We're creating a sangha, and we're hoping that other devotees will come, and we can, first of all, develop our agricultural independence, and from there, try to establish, different aspects of varnashram. But anyway, the writings on the wall, and this whole COVID thing is simply a springboard to help us to get to that point that Prabhupada talked so much about when he was here.
So in other words, you see the COVID, the medical tyranny as you see it as a silver lining in the dark cloud, that with all of the madness that the demons are doing, Prabhupada wanted us to be self-sufficient, sustainable, and we've neglected this over the years. I think, would you say that's one of the instructions that has been neglected?
Yeah, exactly. And somehow or other, even myself, years and years ago while living in Los Angeles, I just got the realization that these deep, loving Vaishnava relationships that we're trying to develop, it's never going to happen in the city, because there's just so much distraction, and because we're born in this culture and we have this addiction to immediate gratification. And even after, chanting Hare Krishna and practicing a spiritual practice for decades and decades, it's still very, very difficult. And so it's this whole COVID thing has exposed the level of cheating, in this society, which is just really a reflection of the internal world within ourselves. So I think now is really, the time where we have to, solidify ourselves with like-minded devotees and go into a protected area where we can really just focus on Prabhupada's essential instructions, increase our hearing and chanting, and try to become completely self-realized souls in this short period of time we have left in this short life.
Well said. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to have your association again after so long.
Likewise, Gaura.
I think Bhanabhata's, points very, very well. There's, development of a kind of I guess, a significant counterculture. And it doesn't matter what sanghas one's in or who's one's initiated by, but just who understands this and it's developing. And I think it would be valuable when you want to talk about, the sustainability and farming and stuff like that. You invite Tapapunj basically come on, who's doing a lot of individual work, both in the community and has done a lot in developing, and we're lucky that Bhanabhata and Yudhisthira and Tapapunj and others, and we also have a small center that we're doing independently as well, that can work together. And I think the things will grow more and more as people, as Prabhupada said, as this thing gets worse and worse, as they start locking down cities and doing more stuff, if they're able to go that far. The Prabhupada said that people will come to the farms by the millions. So I don't think there's whether any of the farms, no matter what Sangha is in, is prepared to have probably more than 10 people even come, what to speak of millions. So a lot of the things have to be thought out in future thinking, as opposed to just what we're doing now, to be able to understand Prabhupada's predictions and being able to justify what will we do when they, have some of these things come in, and how will we sustain both the protection and food, and partly goes to varnashram, other things means, and also protecting our philosophy from deviations and upasampradayas that are being creeping in, as Bhanabhata said. So I think it's an important that if you're in the cities, heed the messages as the shortages come. It may not be one of the best places to be at, but that there's not a lot of other places to go. Find where you can basically work with many of those devotees that in a kinship heart, and work together, because the whole thing is going to be cooperation, not whether you're in this group or this group, that group, because Bhaktisiddhanta said this sectarianism and these kinds of things is the enemy of devotional service. So, yes. The difference is, if you're a Gaudiya Vaishnava, we're in one family. So as one family, we need to be able to work together to, propagate both our philosophical understandings and educate them to others who will be suffering greatly during this time period if things get worse. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Mahaprabhu, thank you.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama.